Hello and welcome to the Mixed Reality Toolkit's Guide to Configuration. Here we're going to walk through all the different configuration options we have available in the new Mixed Reality Toolkit and show you how to get through and navigate them. In short, we're going to have a quick run through all the configuration options within the toolkit. We made a lot of progress in trying to centralize configuration to make it easier to find. We'll walk through all the defaults and what they mean, as by default, as you've seen in the previous videos, starting the Mixed Reality project is as quick and easy as import, play, go. Nice and easy. We then can show you how you can actually customize your configuration to sort of tweak the default configuration down to the set you want, or even walk through actually creating your own configuration from scratch. The world is your oyster. You can do what you like. We hold no bars in this place. And if we've got time, we're also going to do some tips and tricks of things to know and get around in the toolkit itself. So out of the framework that we discussed previously, we're going to focus purely on the configuration. Within the architecture of the new Mixed Reality Toolkit, we've centralized and componentized all the configuration, and we make heavy use of now what you need to call their scriptable objects. This simply means I can actually create an asset of configuration, and if I want, I can swap it out and change it at runtime or do what I like. There's a few things to keep in mind when you're doing this, but we've made full use of this practice within Unity, and it's proven very useful in building projects. In these configuration profiles, you'll see from the screen here is that everything's laid out. Each of the actual profiles are their own little configuration options here. You can see I've got the camera profile, the input system profile, which will go into more detail in a second. And in some cases, we can even swap out entire systems if you so wish. But this is more basic video, just walking through some of the default configuration options. In later sessions, we'll actually go through the more advanced ways you can customize your project to meet your exact needs. So when we look at configuration, it's that we have all this configuration everywhere. In the old Hollow Toolkit and in other Unity projects, you end up finding yourself having to hunt around where something's configured, find an object, tweak its configuration, and beyond. And to break this now, we've used these scriptable objects within Unity. We've bundled these configurations into separate things, and then you can simply reuse and drop it where you like in your project. We start with the old master configuration, as the screen we saw previously, which holds all the main components that the Mixed Reality Toolkit uses. From here, you can then go and configure your input, camera, boundary, teleport, spatial, and diagnostics, and more. And each of these are their own configuration object themselves. So if you want, you can have multiple versions of it and keep to swap them in and out as and when you need it. If you need, everything's up to you. Some of them, such as input, are a little bit more complex because there are then several profiles within input itself. So changing which focus providers we're having, how many pointers we've got, actions, which we'll come on to in a more detailed video later on, what controllers you've got configured, gestures, speech, and everything that drives input itself, including which devices you actually want to drive input from. There's a lot more going into this, and in the demo we'll walk through a lot of these different options. Each service themselves has their own configuration, so as you get a service, such as our boundary service for managing boundary systems where it's appropriate, it has its own configuration, and so on and so forth. And you'll see this pattern repeated throughout the framework. And in most cases, you can swap the configuration out at runtime. So say you've got configuration for controllers for when you're walking down the street and the person suddenly wants to jump into a car and you want to use a completely different set of controls while you're then driving, easy, just swap it out. There's no messing about, having to twist options or disable this component and enable that component. Just swap the config. The input system and everything else will suddenly then react to this new configuration change and then start working that way. Same with gestures, speech. If you want different speech patterns for in different scenes and different services, again, you can just swap them out as and where. Now with the Mixed Reality Toolkit version 2, we pre-bundle a whole set of defaults, and these defaults effectively turn absolutely everything on. This is to promote the easiest starter experience you can have possible. So, as we said, you should always be able to import, configure, run. That's it. But obviously, you wouldn't run a project with absolutely everything on, especially if you're not going to use it. If you're not using speech, don't enable it. There's no point in having that overhead of that running there. Same with diagnostics or other services. Now, when you're building your configuration, you have two options. If you're using the defaults, you can simply do copy and customize, and that'll create you an exact copy of the default configuration. You can then start turning things off, tweaking it out, and customizing it the way you want it. We like to copy it simply because we don't want you to change the defaults, because then if you start another project or you want to start a new scene and you want to have more configuration, you don't want to change what those defaults are, or you want to go back and check to see what it was set at the very beginning. You can also obviously create new profiles, and this will basically create a blank template of that configuration profile and put it in place for you, ready to go. You can, if you want to, also do this from the actual project view and then create your asset and then drag it in if you wish. The choice is up to you. Within the settings themselves, as you're navigating through, we've embedded those same copy options in every single profile. So if you just want to swap out and copy one specific profile, you can do. The choice is up to you. So enough talking, let's actually have a quick demonstration of this. Now, obviously, when you're getting started, first thing you're going to need to do is actually download the latest release. At the time of recording this now, we're currently at Beta 2, but the process will be the same no matter which package you use. We're also looking at actually extending to support things like NuGet. So there's a quick and easy way to simply download a package, and we'll have a separate session on that at some point. Or you can simply download it as you do now, and we're hoping at some point to also integrate with the Unity Package Manager and also the Unity Asset Store. We're still debating that at this point in time. So once you've got your package, you've got your project, and for this demo scene, which you saw previously in the quick start video, I've already imported the Mixed Reality Toolkit, which would simply go Assets, Import, Custom Package, and then select the actual resource that you actually downloaded and import it. With it all running here, I've got my starter scene, thanks to the Unity pre-packaged 3D starter set. And in the scene, I'm simply going to hit configure as we've done before. Now, one thing we'll highlight here is that obviously in the scene, we've got the Mixed Reality Toolkit and then some other elements which control your Mixed Reality scene. With the toolkit selected, you'll see here, I've got the Mixed Reality Toolkit already configured. So that's created the profile, showing it up, and with my default profile here, everything's set up. If we look in the solution here under the Mixed Reality Toolkit in the SDK and profiles, you'll see these are all the default profiles already made up. If I zoom this down, you can see them all listed here. If we go back to the toolkit itself, at the moment, everything's grayed out. This is to ensure that you can't accidentally go and change one of the defaults. So I'm going to simply click copy and customize. Now this has only copied the main profile, not everything. So I'm still using everything on by default. And from here, I can then start further customizing how I want this to work. So if I want a new input system, I can simply click on this, replace with the copying, or the boundary, or the spatial aware system. If we navigate through these, we can look at which ones we want to actually change and which ones we don't. So we can look in here, I've got the actual camera settings like persistent cameras, the clipping settings, and transparency settings. I can go back to the profile I was on previously, and then have a look at my input and other settings. And you notice within the input, I mentioned earlier that there's more detailed functionality behind this for all the different settings in here. And then what I'm going to do is go back and I'm going to copy that input one. So I've got my own input system settings. But again, I'm still using the defaults because we're narrowing it down to what you actually want to be able to configure. So I look at the pointer profiles and the pointer settings. I'm actually quite happy with those already. So there's some default pointer prefabs and settings already defined. I'm happy with those to stay as they are. We got actions and rules, which will come onto a further video. But then we've also got like our controller mappings. So here you can see these are all the different controllers we can have. And looking at these, we can actually look at all the different options we can set. Now, if we want to start playing with the controller profiles, again, we need to create our own copy of that. And then we can look at all the different actions set up. So if I look at my Windows Mixed Reality controller, I can see I've got things like the trigger set up, the spatial pointer, what I do when I click on the trigger, when I click on the thumbstick, grip press, grip pose, and other options. And from this point here, I can start changing these to whatever I want to be, or adding new actions as I see fit. So I can say, well, I don't want the trigger to be select, I actually want that to do nothing, and the menu button I want to be select, because I'm just a really crazy guy. But really, no, I want menu to be menu and I want select to be select. On certain systems as well, you'll have touch process, and where we don't, we try to simulate touch. So when you actually get a very slight pressure on the actual sensor, we can actually emulate a touch. That way, when you create a project and it's in line with all the other different types of controllers which do support touch, we can provide simple ways to actually emulate that as well. But it's the same with all the rest. So there's my mouse. No pretty picture for mouse, I'm afraid. Your Oculus Remote. Lots of options in an Oculus Remote, and so on and so forth. And when you configure the settings here, you configure them effectively for all platforms. And then whether it's in OpenVR, whether it's on native support, then the same settings you configure for the entire project will then relay over onto those other platforms. So you don't have to keep configuring it for every single different platform. You configure it once, and it works. And we go back. I've got my gestures. I'm not using gestures, so I'll actually will just go and remove gestures, and I'm not using speech, so I'm just going to turn off speech and go back to my main configuration profile. I'm also going to disable spatial awareness because I'm not using it, and that's it. I've configured everything I want to do. There's a load of other options here you can go and navigate and play with as you wish. But as I said, you can also go and create these on your own. So if I want to go in here, I'd go Create, Mixed Reality Toolkit, and then I've got all the configuration profiles here that I want to set up. So if I wanted to go and set up some different, another configuration mapping profile, I can do. I'm going to call this racing settings. Then I can go off onto my controllers. I can say, right, well, for racing, I want to change things up a bit so that the touchpad position is going to be for my driving. It's going to be my driving direction controls. My thumbstick is going to be for my view controls. Say the grip is going to be my brake, and the trigger will be my accelerate. And we'll go into more of what these actions are and what they do later on. But giving you a choice, the fact that I just reconfigured my input settings for driving, and then at runtime, go back to the input profile. It's a case of the racing settings. I'm simply going to replace my mappings in there, but doing it programmatically. Obviously here, drag and drop in the editor. I'm not going to do that while the project's running realistically. And then once that's swapped out, I'm then using a completely different set of configuration controls for a different mode. And then when I'm finished with that, then I'm going to go back and swap it again. Oops. You can also use the selector here, and it will pick up just the mappings and controllers that you can actually use for that setting, so you can't accidentally put the wrong configuration settings in the wrong profile. The system will autocorrect and make sure you can't do it. Nice and safe, make sure everything will just work. Then I can hit run, and then I'm off and going. And that's my project configured. And you can tailor this to your heart's content. Now, the only one we basically say that you shouldn't swap out at runtime are these input actions and input action rules, simply because they're defining what things do in your project. And since your project itself is not going to change at runtime, you'll change different things, change what different things do, but the project will change. So the things you can do also shouldn't change. For performance reasons, we made sure the fact that these are These are trained to work to meet what your project needs. That's a quick run through all the different configuration options. I highly recommend you go and experiment, play, tweak with how you want things to work, use the bits that you want. The bits that you don't, just turn them off. The system will not load them, not be any overhead in the memory or anything else, and only use what makes sense. That's the Mixed Reality Toolkit configuration guide. I shall catch you on another session.